Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War Update Extra video, giving you extra tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. I'm going to, obviously, as I normally do, cover a number of different topics today. I'm going to start with where I was ranting earlier in my news pieces with regard to what's going on in Congress. Now, this is a nice little note from Randy Mott of, I think, hope in terms of what might take place in this kind of impasse with regard to other things to look out for. So who is Randy Mott? He is a Republican activist, lawyer, environmental businessman, former infantry officer, American in Poland and Orlando. So he says, one, the US Lend-Lease provisions are in the NDAA, so that's the National Defense Authorization Act for Ukraine. That is in conference committee right now. It will pass relatively soon. Two, while the big aid package will be passed soon in the Senate and a House bill will be brought up before Christmas, this will likely delay more aid authorization until January, given the Christmas recess. The amount in the package could theoretically be reduced from $60 billion. Other amendments that pass in the Senate may also have to be hatched out with the House in another conference committee. The NDAA has some Ukraine aid in it, including long-range ATACMS in the House bill. Three, the US could, in the interim, provide 250 Bradleys, F-16s and more M1A1 tanks under Lend-Lease for the book value on the equipment, less decommissioning costs plus shipping. Ukraine could pay back in 15 to 20 years, no budget impact, no more congressional authority required when NDAA is approved. Of course, it needs NDAA approval. Aid will number four, aid will not stop, and the amount and nature of the military hardware will be more combat effective the next few batches under any realistic scenario I can think of. Five, the issue is the unnecessary delay, and of course it is, and that's point. It may eventually happen, and it may be great when it happens. But the delay, the unnecessary delay, is the frustration. Six, I also predict this will come with a huge congressional push to declare Ukraine winning as the goal. I really do hope that some of those things that the Republicans want, some of the clarity involved, will mean that there will be very explicit objectives attached to the aid. I think that will be definitely beneficial. Seven, to aid critics, this is already audited and tracked, and even more oversight controls will be added in the House bill. Europe now provides much more aid than the US. So if you look over the last couple of months, that seems to be true. So, yeah, but a hopeful look at things there from Randy Mott. Right, let's go on to this chap, Dimko Zlutenko, who is founder of Ukrainian Transparent Military Charity Fund, with lots of letters that I'm not going to pronounce, former software engineer. Okay. This is one of the darkest moments for me in the war against Russia. I just returned from visiting many of our friends fighting in Donetsk region, and we had long discussions on the war and geopolitics around it. Authentic thoughts from Ukraine's front lines noted in this thread. I will kick it off with the fact that many Ukrainian military actually closely follow the news in the world and know how it affects them. Specifically, they follow border blockade and confirm they have volunteer military aid stuck in there. So that is a challenge. There's definitely aid stuck in those blockades at the border. Now, hopefully, Slovakian one is now cleared up. We're just looking for the Poland one to be sorted out. They genuinely don't understand why fellow Poles would block the biggest logistics border to Ukraine, a country at war. Ukraine is especially weak now for political game, given it's being attacked with ballistic missiles and drones every day and night, and even mentioning artillery. Now, it's rather similar to what's happening in Congress, which is, we know this is really bloody important, so this is what we are going to use as leverage. It's human nature, I guess. It's just really frustrating because on its own moral components, Ukraine aid or freely flowing borders are supremely important. That's a moral obligation. So it's especially egregious that something that's so obviously morally right is the thing that's being held up, especially when there are human lives at stake. There are lives at stake here, Ukrainian lives. No country can defeat Russia these days on its own except the US possibly. That is why Ukraine needs the support, and it got a lot of support. Russia is strong. Not every military operation was perfect for us, but this is exactly how any other country would perform. This is war. This is war, and all of us are extremely thankful that we are not left one-on-one with this monster Russia. That's obvious, and that if the world won't supply Ukraine with ammo, Ukraine will fall in a matter of weeks. At this stage, to hold the line, you need enormous amounts of ammo. Not a single country can outproduce Russia in this case, and not a single country can afford to sacrifice as many men as Russia did to conquer Ukraine. If Russia takes over, the world would see another and another butcher, Mariupol, Marinka, filled with our corpses. Many fail to realize that the Russian invasion is not a case of our government to solve solely, but also to each and every citizen. Russia is going all in on this war, and it touches everyone. Moreover, it's a national security problem for so many countries in Europe. Moreover, it's ideological war, dictatorship against freedom and democracy. To me, freedom is the dearest. In fact, this is the only thing worth fighting for. I get it that many people have the luxury to switch on to the next thing, but we Ukrainians and supporters, we can't. Our lives are at stake because most of us won't be able to survive under Russian government, pushing us as a colonized meat into the meat grinder for invading other European countries. I'm sad to acknowledge that people in Europe still don't understand that this war is not local. So this is combined with extreme conditions in the front lines. We literally saw on drone live stream how hundreds of Russians push our defense line. Russia has a lot of men to send to assaults at Ukrainian trenches, mostly prisoners from Storm Z. This is also combined with Russian Shahed drones and ballistic missiles targeting our infrastructure sites in our peaceful cities. Most military servicemen have their families in those peaceful cities, and they are significantly worried about what Russia will do this winter. The production of Shahed drones has ramped up significantly, making it possible for Russia to produce between 7 and 1,000 drones a month. They have already started using them, e.g. the latest attack was 75 drones, this was written a few days ago, at once in all directions. They really do a lot of damage if they hit. We have talked to many commanders, and they say that at this stage of the war, we must admit that Ukraine's fighters have been really heroic in standing against Russia. Moreover, we even did successful offensives on tactical and strategic levels. This is a unique thing to achieve without air superiority, naval fleet, and not enough artillery ammunition, not enough air defense. Ukraine held itself against all odds. Still, Ukraine is already facing cruel reality of not being able to launch successful offensives without more supplies. The war is at this stage is very active, but it's extremely hard for both sides to break through the defense. Each position in the trench is being assaulted almost every hour, but with no or little gains, like literally meters. I had massive respect for each and every country, community, and individual supporting Ukraine. This tells me a lot about our shared values of freedom, liberty, and compassion. Thank you for this. Ukraine can't win on its own. We can win if we stand together, united by shared values against the diktats of violence Russia is pushing. Unite and make your impact against the Russian invasion. I've seen how our initiative to get tech devices to Ukrainian defenders saves lives. We will stand for freedom. It's not over yet. And I think we are still far from over. I'm afraid this will drag on for another decade, but I don't see any other choice for myself given my values. I will help Ukraine fight for freedom any way I can until Ukraine wins. Well said. That's just another view from inside Ukraine there. Anton Geopolitical here shows in Russia, children learn patriotism while shooting at Biden, Zelensky, and Stoltenberg. So Biden, obviously US President, Zelensky, Ukrainian President, and Stoltenberg, head of NATO. They are the mortal enemies of Russian children. A festival called Peaceful Warrior of the Russian Federation was held in the Russian city of Tomsk. At one of the locations, a shooting range was set up for children. Yeah, Peaceful Warrior, where instead of targets, there were photos of those three. Yeah, there you go. Right, talking about Geroshchenko here, he says the Soviet Union lost about 15,000 soldiers dead in Afghanistan over 10 years. In the first Chechen war, the number of Russian casualties amounted to between 5 and 14,000 in almost 2 years. Estimates differ. In both cases, the USSR, Russia, acknowledged their defeat and left, with Chechnya. Russia returned 3 years later. Russian losses due to their aggression in Ukraine already amount to hundreds of thousands, yet Putin shows no intention of stopping. and Russians seem to be okay with that. Both Ukrainian military leadership, this was confirmed by the Commander-in-Chief Zaluzhny, and our allies assumed that there is a certain number of losses that Russia would consider unacceptable. Then either Russian leadership would take the political decision to look for ways to exit the conflict, or the Russian population would somehow revolt against such a huge number of pointless deaths. E.g., in both Afghanistan and Chechen wars, committees of soldiers' mothers were eventually an influential power. This is worth dwelling on a little bit. So within the planning for some of these operations, it appears that Ukrainians have thought, we heard this from the BBC article from the guy who was interviewed or got his voice out to the BBC to the BBC concerning attacks at Krinky and getting over the river there, and like we were expecting them to capitulate, right? But they didn't, and I'm wondering whether actually this was planned in a number of times in a number of places during this war, particularly during the counteroffensive, which is, you know, if we pressure here and we keep going and they lose this many people, then surely they'll start looking for exits. But they have lost that many people, and they haven't started looking for exits. They're just there, stalwart, defending, because actually they rule with an iron fist behind the lines there in terms of the military hierarchy and in terms of the Kremlin. And that is a miscalculation, it appears, from allies and from Ukraine, and possibly understandable, because you think, well, we would never sustain that a number of casualties and continue in this war. But it's interesting as well that previously in the Afghan and Chechen wars, committees of soldiers' mothers were pretty influential. Russia started trying to shut them down, label them as fake. And there are those mothers who are getting together, but they are at the moment not having any effect. That might be a hope for the Ukrainians there. As we now know, these assumptions were wrong. The Kremlin regime has mostly mobilized and recruited men from the poorer parts of Russian society, where the value of human life is smaller than the chance to receive a free Lada car. In the same logic, our Western allies also believed that the Russian authorities would somehow be more pragmatic and rational. So their idea was to make the war too costly for Putin, with sanctions, for example, but at the same time not to threaten Putin and allow him to keep a good face. Making the war too costly assumes that there is a price, after which the war is recognized as unprofitable, and the regime would look for a way out. In many instances, this position remains strong among our allies. The logic of the Kremlin regime is completely different. There is no acceptable or unacceptable price. There is only victory or defeat. The Kremlin has decided that winning the war is the only way for the current regime to retain power. I've talked about this before. I've talked about how Putin is inextricably linked to the outcome of this war. He has an existential link to it. Like, Putin will not be alive and Russia remove themselves from Ukraine. I think in order for Russia to kind of leave Ukraine in a losing status, you would need Putin to no longer be the leader, to be most probably dead. Thus, defeat in a war is a point of no return, and any price of victory is acceptable. I absolutely agree with this. What to do then? First, accept this new reality, then look for the enemy's weak points, and that are more valuable and painful to them than loss of cannon fodder. Undermining and lessening Russia's combat potential still remains a key task. When they're given the right tools, Ukraine is very effective at that. Therefore, Ukraine needs to receive what we need in full amounts and on time. Some decisions might need to be reconsidered, like forbidding strikes on Russian territory. Such strikes would undermine Russian logistics significantly and would save a lot of Ukrainian lives. Sanctions still remain a key area. Closing loopholes that are used to circumvent them is crucial. While Russia remains in its current state, it will continue being a threat to the security of the region, the whole world, and itself. The imperial behemoth is incapable of real change, which plays into the hands of Putin's regime. Ukrainian victory must mean Russia's defeat, not deterrence. That is a crucial paradigm shift that would allow to end this war sustainably and not just be a ceasefire to restore Russia's military potential. I mean, what you don't want is Russia to be able to exit from this and be able to go again in 10 years' time. To be able to reconstitute. It gets back to what I've discussed a number of times, the kind of Machiavellian maxim that you either completely destroy an enemy or you completely, conciliate with them. There is no middle ground. If you do half of any of those, then you're just setting yourself up for, it's what happened with World War II. World War One, the Germans weren't completely and utterly taken out of the picture. They were allowed to reconstitute and come back and reinvigorate, come back anew. So, there is something to be said about that kind of Machiavellian maxim there. Right. So moving on, it's just a bit of footage here. There's a couple of Ukrainians here who fight off a whole bunch of Russians. I can't really show it to you, but I will link it in the video because I think it's worth a bit of a view. Russian drone footage shows 2 Ukrainian heroes holding off a Russian assault group in Verbove, killing almost all the attackers. In the most cold-blooded fashion, 2 Ukrainians, while observed by a Russian drone, take up a position in a trench. It's interesting watching this to see what the Russians say about their own troops and about what the situation is. Russian drone operator navigates an assault group that fails to locate the Ukrainians, who open fire, killing almost 5 of them instantly and throwing grenades at them. The drone operators are in shock. A Russian vehicle also apparently explodes nearby at the start of the engagement, but it's unclear what took it out. In the end, the drone has to leave while Russians try to evacuate the dead and wounded. Anyway, just there are so many bits of war footage, but that might be one to lift your spirits maybe a little bit higher if you're pro-Ukrainian at the moment. Right, here is a video, and I can't really show all of this, but it does give you, because he starts stamping on mice, and people obviously might not like that, but this gives you an indication of how problematic mice are on the front lines. What with harvests that haven't been harvested, crops haven't been harvested, you have an absolute growth in mice population, and they are also getting into trenches, into dugouts, and causing all sorts of trouble. This is a Russian vehicle that is flushing them out of the engine. So then he starts stamping those mice, but they just keep coming out, mice and mice and mice. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mice in that vehicle, obviously keeping warm there. Just, huge problem for the fighters there. Now, I'm going to leave you with this positive and then something of an emotional appeal there. So, okay, the positive, Lyubov Prochukan, 75, lost her leg last year when tending to cows. I won't play the music. This fact, however, didn't compromise her optimism or her mobility. Last year, she put smiles on the faces of medical personnel in Austria by waltzing around on her new prosthesis. A year later, Lyubov is just as wonderful and light on her feet. That's the kind of spirit that you really appreciate seeing. So I'll probably get unfortunately, music gives me copyright infringements, but you put it inside and it gets compressors. She says, but she seems pretty she seems to have got pretty used to it. I get on it and then up and go. That's it. And look at that smile on her face. It's not my leg, she says. Let's go back there. It's not my leg, but I walk and I'm alive. And she goes to tend her cows. This is a row of cows I was milking with my friend Lavinenko, Antonia Mikhailovna or something. And this row was milked by Marina, the official milkmaid. As for my friend and I, we just came to help save the cows. We both worked at the farm our entire lives. Here, if I'm not mistaken, we have 90 to 100 animals. Marina and I transported the milk. She checked, we milked 100 litres. As soon as I left the barn, moved a bit, I got wounded. I went to hospital. We had one spare seat in our ambulance. I asked, do you have injured people? The doctor said, we have wounded grandma, but she's doing all right. You don't have to take her to Kiev. She's always in a good mood. Yeah, you don't have to take her to Kiev. She's always in a good mood. And here we have footage of her there. I came closer and then saw her foot wasn't doing too well. A professor comes and shows an x-ray on his phone, she says. I saw how my ligaments were sticking out. We have to amputate. If it's necessary, go ahead, I said. And this guy says, I made arrangements in Vienna, Austria. I think it must be, I wonder if it's her son. She went with the first group. We went for the treatment in Vienna. There they made a prosthesis and she went through physical therapy. When her doctors came as a concilium to release me, I said that I would dance for them as a gesture of gratitude. She does indeed, and I did a dance. She became a star in Vienna. This video has to be shown. That is amazing. This is better than working with psychologists. She's got so much energy and kindness. That's incredible. Awesome. Happy news. But I am going to leave you with this. So I think this is a Canadian working
Christmas gifts
in Ukraine, and obviously, you know, you attach emotive music to this stuff, and it plays on her heartstrings. But you know, I think her sentiments are worth communicating here. So,
people often ask me what it's like to live in Ukraine, and I was just buying Christmas gifts for kids with cancer and soldiers so that they can send gifts home to their children. And there was a soldier who'd lost a leg, and I said, I know you don't understand me, but thank you for your service. And his wife translated, and he shook my hand, and the lady at the checkout just started bawling when he left, and I had to do 2 checks, and she just cried the whole time. And then when I finished paying, I held the lady I don't know. I'm in Kyiv, and I'm like 9 hours from the war. But the war is with us all. And you can't go shopping without seeing somebody missing a limb. And it is not uncommon here. Nobody looks twice anymore. You just know that those people sacrifice for their country. Living in Ukraine is, you can see pictures of people eating out at dinner, but the war is with them and it'll never leave. And it means strangers embracing at checkout lines because you are broken. It is hell. It is hell because even if you are having a good time, your mind is somewhere else, or your heart is somewhere else, and you are broken on the inside.